Good morning to everybody. Welcome to our monthly North Texas Renewable Energy Group membership meeting. This month, our presenter is Travis Young, the owner of Studio Momentum Architects. As is usual, we are recording this meeting for the benefit of our members who cannot attend and for the public in general. And you can watch the video after the presentation. It usually takes us about a day or so to get it up on the website, but it'll be available then. We usually start out with any updates for our membership. And so, Lisa, would you please go ahead and give our members an update about where we are?
Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Lisa Megel. I'm the membership coordinator. And as of today, we have 52 paying members, although we have lots more people that we send emails to. And of course, our meetings are always free and open to the public, but we also very much welcome people who want to come in as paying members. It pays, it's only a $20 annual individual membership. And it pays for things like these Zoom meetings. And when we can actually meet in person, it pays for coffee and the cost of our venue and other activities that we want to do. We also have business level and professional level memberships. Professional level is more for individual people engaged in solar or energy efficiency, and business level memberships are for people with employees. To join, you can go to the NTREG website. There's a join/donate tab. If you are also interested in being a member of our mothership, the Texas Solar Energy Society down in Austin, or the American Solar Energy Society, one easy way of doing that is you can go to the Texas website, txses.org, and do their join donate page, because you can do all three of those at once if you so desire. But welcome to anybody new who's attending for the first time. If you have any questions, you can shoot me an email. I'm on the contact me page for NTREG, or we have a contact us page. And ready to see this presentation. It should be fun.
Thank you, Lisa. We also are anticipating that sometime later this year, we will have in-person, whether to limit it to some extent or not, but we are anticipating either late summer to sometime in the fall that we might be having some in-person contact as well. And so Mark Whitty, one of our new board members, is now the event coordinator. And usually there's a little bit of an update on events that might be coming up. Mark?
Yes.
Do you have any update for our members?
Not this morning, unfortunately, but
Okay.
we will for next month.
Okay, fair enough. But everybody needs to start thinking and watching out for the anticipated in-person contact again with NTREG in the late summer to early fall, and we will have more information on that as we get closer to that. We also have an opportunity at this time before our speaker for announcements to be made by any of our members of any events that they know that are coming up, or information that they have that they wish to share with the membership. Are there any members who have any announcements to make for us this morning? Anybody? Go ahead and unmute yourself and give us any update.
This is Molly Rook. I wanted to say that the Dallas ISD had a briefing of the staff summary, which was edited down to what they think they can actually do with very little staff. And so that presentation was made on Thursday. There will be a vote on it on April 22nd, which just so happens to be Earth Day. And I'll be sending information out about that. I stopped working on getting more input on energy improvements to it, because I could see all they were doing they were narrowing things down rather than adding. But I will send something out to the NTREG list about that. And the climate reality meeting next week, April 17th from 1 to 2:30 will be an update on the Dallas CCAP. And then the second part of the meeting will have a presentation on Green Careers Dallas by Tracy Wallace.
Terrific. Thank you, Molly. Anybody else?
Old school way.
Any other member?
This is Mellon.
Hi, Melon.
Hi. On April 17th, there is a large EV event in Hearst. I think it's Hearst. That Rick Baller and the North Texas electric auto people. He was putting out notifications, and that seems like a good event. I suspect that James might know more about it than I do, if he wants to add. But we considered, I was talking to Mark, and we considered making an NTREG physical presence there, but it didn't work out. But I think Rick said this is going to be the second largest EV rally in the country. So,
And I want to say that I think somebody posted that on the NTREG Groups IO as well earlier in the week. I thought I saw it.
yeah, Rick Baller posted that.
Good.
All right, bye.
Thank you, Melon. Any other member have any announcements they wish to make to the membership? Okay, how about any guests that are here today that are not members? Any announcements or information you wish to share with the group? Okay, nobody's jumping up. The Climate Reality Project, Molly has been kind enough to let us know the topic for their meeting next Saturday. We appreciate that. They are one of the groups that we have a high degree of collaboration with. And then Ryan, how about the young professionals in energy? Do you have any update or information from the group you wish to share with us?
I wish I had an update for you. No update at this time. Still kind of in a holding pattern.
Okay. With that, unless anybody else has any announcements, Joella, I need to turn the program over to you to present our speaker.
Okay, hi, I'm one of the co-coordinators for this year, for the term, as alongside with our new board member, Gregory Isaacs. But I'll go ahead and begin with the introduction for Mr. Travis Young, which we thank for being here on this afternoon. Mr. Travis G. Young has a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Design from Arizona State University and a Master of Architecture from the University of Texas at Austin. He has been a licensed architect in the state of Texas since 1996 and has run Studio Momentum Architects, PC, with a focus on sustainable design and residential architecture since 2001. In recent years, he has focused on small-scale residential design and accessory dwelling units in the city of Austin. He has also offered general contracting and construction administration services through his firm, Studio Momentum Design Build. Since the beginning of office, Mr. Young has been an early adopter of building information modeling and has used it to both design and produce construction documents in his firm since 2004. Mr. Young presented his case study on net zero affordable housing at the 2017 Texas Society of Architects Convention in Austin, and he has recently completed a 2-year service with the AIA Residential Advocacy Committee, serving as chair through 2021. We humbly present to you Mr. Travis G. Young. Welcome, Travis.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, everybody.
Just to give you a little heads up, this presentation is running at about 45 minutes. I have I'm going to set my timer when I start for 30, so you might hear that tone go off, and when it does, I'll speed it up if necessary. I'm going to share with you some experiences over the last 8 to 10 years doing small house design and construction. And I'm going to share the lessons that are sometimes painful lessons, I have to admit, and hopefully those will be educational for everybody. I also wanted to thank Joella, whom I met at the Cool House tour, and she took a look at one of the projects which I'll feature today. And thank you for inviting me to come and speak to this esteemed group. And also wanted to thank James Orenstein for searching the Facebook webs for finding videos and other information and articles about my firm, because I failed to provide those for him. So thank you, that was great. If you like, we'll go ahead and share the screen here. Okay. Are you able to see my full slideshow?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so title of the presentation is Small House Design and Construction today, and we're going to look at some of the effort it takes to do small houses, as well as some of the barriers. Just wanted to show some quick bad pictures of the first accessory dwelling unit. That's what ADU stands for, which was a garage apartment in the back of a lot. Back in the early 90s, 400 square foot unit with a kitchenette and a bathroom, 1 bedroom, and a really stylish, as you can see here, a really stylish wall unit. This is my office from where I am presenting today. This is a small accessory dwelling unit, 550 square feet on the 2nd floor above a carport and some storage. And this is in my backyard, so it's great for me. It's helped allow guests to come stay. And actually during the snowpocalypse, we didn't lose power, and so we had a young couple with a child come and stay in my office guest space for a couple of days.
That is fantastic.
So a quick overview of the presentation today. We're going to get into the definition of small house, because that's different for everybody. I'm going to look at the movement towards small houses. Little touch on some demographics and population issues that are forcing these changes and these desires. Some policy and zoning issues that affect small house design, and several case studies with lessons learned, including cost analysis, and finally a net zero affordable housing project. So we'll start with definition. I wanted to speak to an acronym I'm going to be using here, ADU often, which is accessory dwelling unit. This is defined in the International Residential Code as a building that's accessory to the primary use on a residential lot. The city of Austin in particular has accessory dwelling unit ordinance, and accessory dwelling unit is the fairly common term for this second smaller house that might be on a single family lot throughout the country and different municipalities. One question is, how small is small? In the accessory dwelling unit in the city of Austin has a limitation of a maximum of 1,100 square feet. But we also see some discussions about super tiny and very tiny homes, 200 square feet often, or on HGTV, you'll see things like the house on a trailer, which is effectively an RV. Some documents and texts that I have and that I have had many clients bring to me. In the last decade, it's been, I would say, almost 80% of every custom client that I've had has brought one of Sarah Suzanka's books, The Not So Big House, to my office when they want things, and they point to the pictures and go, that's what I want. We want less house. We want smaller. Now, this is a 1-minute video of a HGTV advertisement.
When we were out hunting houses, one of the most surprising things was how many variations on the tiny house concept there are. You know, there's the ultra green spaceship and there's grandma's old country cottage, all fitting in tiny. You'll see a lot of options, and you know, you just be creative. You can create some variation and do something that'll work just for you. Originally, the model we saw was 280 square feet. We went with a 336 square foot model, so it's a little bit bigger. We went with a fully tiled out bathroom and a full size tub, which was one of the key issues for me. We went with a covered deck, so you know, even if a rainstorm blows in, we can still sit out there, have coffee.
For us, I think going smaller made a lot of sense. We started really realizing what's important to us lifestyle-wise, traveling, spending time doing things outside the house, not being restricted by the costs of a house and the maintenance of one.
We can just lock it and leave it and travel now.
Oh, where to?
Spain.
Maybe hit up Portugal, a little wine country.
Yeah. I think tiny is going to be more of the norm and less of a trend because people want to do more with their lives. They don't want to be burdened with material belongings. So, you know, going tiny, you can free yourself up to live the life you want to live. And I think that's what a lot of people want to do.
It's like less is more, and it's really working.
So funny video, in my opinion. Great example of what's happening in the municipalities in Texas. And we'll talk a little bit about those demographics as well. I wanted to speak just a tiny bit about the pandemic, some of the effects that I've seen. For one, almost half of the work that's happened over the last year in my firm are young couples. Maybe they've got 1 or 2 children and they are working from home now. And it's been a real struggle, the limitations of their house. And so it's been interesting to see that the solutions for that problem have, one, been larger, a single family house where we're adding more bedrooms, where one of the bedrooms is effectively an office, or this idea of an accessory dwelling or an accessory building where we don't actually have meet the criteria of a dwelling, but we have this extra space with a bathroom in it. It's air conditioned, it's in the backyard, it's a place for them to go and do the home office work where the children aren't necessarily in their lap. Obviously, on all of the home shows, you see a lot of these houses on trailers. These are tiny houses. The presentation and case studies today aren't going to focus on that, but it's worth mentioning that the codes and restrictions associated with recreational vehicles are much different than permanent housing. For one, the RVIA is one that stipulates how these things are built. They are never meant to be permanent structures. They were only meant to be occasionally, live in occasionally. And when we get to having something on a foundation that's permanently affixed, then all of the zoning ordinance and other codes affect that structure on the lot. And certainly when you tie into utility systems, that's a significant cost. And whenever I see these pictures of these little houses, you know, built out of wood and having maybe it's probably plastic or vinyl tile, but it looks like clay tile. And you think about just the massive weight of something like that, and you wonder why, because doesn't Airstream do it better with the aluminum and the aerodynamics, you know, this great picture of a guy pulling it with a bicycle, right? The negatives really for Airstream is that we don't have great insulation in this thin body, and we have the radiant barrier on the exterior. But I heard many stories during our snow apocalypse about people going into their RV because they had a solar generator and were able to get a little bit of heat in there and using that as a place to weather our weather event. Here you go, just one of the latest additions. You got 2-bedroom potential with the removable dinette. These are really built like ships, you know, they're very, very efficient uses of space. Another aspect of these ultra designed, ultra tiny homes. This is a good example where you can share 76 square feet with 8 of your favorite friends. They look very happy. $45,000 to buy the unit, but then you got to get it. So here we go with the helicopter bringing it to you, of course, across a beautiful fjord from Germany. So a brief look at Texas's demographics. In Austin and Houston, for example, we have between 40 and 60 people a day moving here. And most of these people are single or two-person couples. They're maybe non-married or about to be married. Many of them are college educated in Austin, for example. And the median household income is about $71,576. This is a small doc from 2010 to 2018. I don't have the latest, but I would imagine in the last 3 years, this has stayed very consistent. Texas, 20% of the total population growth for the entire United States. Where are they moving? The darker zones here: Austin, San Antonio, metro area; Dallas, Fort Worth, metro area. This timeline was up to 2017, so oil was happening again in Midland, Odessa, and then of course, Houston. An interesting statistic associated with this population growth is that the number of households with children has declined. So we have smaller households, and that is also pushing this desire for maybe a smaller unit. They haven't really had their children yet and realized how much more space they need to have. This is the latest statistics on our median sales price here in Austin, $370,000. Everything in the last 2 years has been astounding. The increase in these median sale prices in the inner city, it's just, and it's the same all over Texas, but it's just the increase in value is astounding over the last 2 years. So just to look at Austin in terms of the money reality of this, single family house average costs around $370K. A two-person household average $71,576. Another astounding statistic that many of these young couples are college educated, and that means they have a nice student loan, on average $35K per person. So just looking at what they might be able to qualify for if they have 10% down and only one of them has a college degree, so maybe they only have $35K in debt. Maybe they could have qualified for a $160K loan. So that's just not, it's not accessible. Housing in Austin is not accessible for the vast majority of people that are actually moving here. So some of the barriers, we're going to start talking about actual on-site built homes, some of the barriers that affect the cost and impact the ability to build them. First, look at deed restrictions. Now, during the Jim Crow era, when subdivisions were being made in 1940s and 50s, a lot of the subdivisions in Austin, for example, and across the South, would have certain requirements about the size of a house, that you couldn't rent, for example, a house on a property, that it had to cost a certain amount of money. And even went so far as saying, well, certain people, certain races aren't allowed to have these property. They can't actually purchase the property. Now, a lot of those portions of the deed restrictions were excluded during the Civil Rights Act, but a lot of the actual site constraints of the subdivision are still in place. And these deed restrictions are enforced by anybody in the subdivision. So this is irrelevant to what the city or municipality may put in terms of zoning on the property. If those deed restrictions were put in place with the filing of the subdivision, then they can still be applied in a civil lawsuit. We also have a lot of planned urban developments, a lot of subdivision, newer subdivision tracts where you have covenants, conditions of the CC&Rs. And those can affect things like whether you can have solar panels on your roof. What does the house look like? How many houses can you have? For example, how many living units can you have? Even the International Residential Code is split. You have it split between the residential code, which is on 1 and 2 family dwellings. So that means that you can have 2 family. That's duplex, maybe 2 units on a lot. But it doesn't address triplex. It doesn't address quadruplex or multifamily, because all of those are in the commercial code. The IRC also affects sizes, so limitations. So there are some reasonable limitations, both in terms of stair access, egress, life safety. And so a lot of the little tiny houses that you might see on a trailer where it's actually trying to be an RV, but not really a house. And they always have that little loft over the bathroom, which has got maybe a 3 or 4 foot head clearance. You can throw a mattress up there, and they got a ship's ladder going up there. You can't actually build that on a site-built house because if you have a sleeping area, you need to have egress for fire, and you need to have a staircase that meets minimum criteria, and a ship's ladder isn't going to do it. So I'm going to look at a couple of case studies where these things have impacted projects. This one was an existing house in one of the established neighborhoods in Austin. In the back side of the house was a second living unit that had some window units, and it was in a bit of disrepair, but it was a rental unit for the property owner. And they came to our firm to fix that structure.
Tom Thumb.
Okay, I heard some
Please
over
mute,
talk. Sorry.
please mute
I
your
thought maybe
phone.
it's a
if you're
small
not
group, so it's okay if someone had a question. This is the existing condition. You can see that the living unit was in some disrepair. This is our site plan. This lot was over 12,000 square feet, fairly large lot for City of Austin standards. But we added and remodeled the existing house, and then we pushed back a garage with a small living unit, 550 square feet on the second floor. Towards the lot, since it was large, we put a carport on the lot side to allow visual access to the back of the lot and have an outdoor covered space, and then one car garage, an exterior stair, and then a one-bedroom unit. Very, very clean, straightforward floor plan. This is what it looked like after they were almost done with construction. That's the house remodel itself, and you can kind of see the garage peeking out. Here's the garage carport combination with the building in the top. Now, this particular project was permitted as two-family, meaning that it was an accessory dwelling unit under the City of Austin code for the garage apartment. However, in this neighborhood, there was an attorney who lived on a lot several houses down and saw this going on and went online and saw that it was a second living unit. Even though there was already a living unit there existing, he sent the attorney's letter, as you might say, notice letting us know that that was not allowed, that we could not have a second living unit on the house and that he wanted it removed. This, of course, happened about halfway through construction. So the City of Austin has a regulation which they call guest house, and any lot that's over 10,000 square feet can have a guest house. It has some restrictions by City of Austin zoning code that you cannot rent it out to paying guests, for example. So you couldn't do a short-term rental with that thing, a guest house. But the limitations on size from the ADU are not there. So a guest house could be allowed, and they wouldn't be able to rent it to anyone and therefore, damage the value of the attorney's property, which is what part of the attorney's claims. However, that wasn't good enough. And so he went ahead and started to raise the fact that he was going to bring a lawsuit. So my client had to hire an attorney. They had a mediation. They discussed what would be required, and the only thing that would make this neighbor happy was if they put in force another deed restriction on the property and file it, that no one could ever condo regime and sell out the guest house, and it could never be rented. So that cost my client $8,000. And during that mediation, both the attorneys on both sides were like, hey, we could definitely go after the architect. Luckily, they didn't. But when you have insurance and things start to go bad this way, everyone gets drawn into something like this. So luckily, that change was enough to placate the neighbor. Now, I'm sorry about the quality of this image, but the City of Austin had a zoning change that they enacted about 10 years ago, which allowed what they call mixed-use zoning. And so in certain areas of the city, we have what was initially residential tracts of land that have become commercial uses, like little restaurants or little retail shops. And the MU zoning allowed you to have more than 2 living units. In this case, this moniker, CSMUCONP, means that it's very long, but essentially it is a commercial services subdistrict with a mixed use overlay. There's a conditional overlay which restricts certain uses, like they wouldn't be allowed to have a drive-through liquor store, for example. And then NP means neighborhood plan. So we had a situation where we could produce a duplex. We have 2 units that we could put on the back of this lot that already has a single family lot, i.e. a triplex. So here's a quick look at the plan. Both units are about 1,100 square feet. We have a 1-car garage for both off the alleyway, a bedroom and bath down, and then upstairs you have the living, kitchen, dining space and another bedroom and bath up. Although the CS commercial services zoning allowed us to have a 0 setback condition up to the property line, the City of Austin utility has different ideas about that. And we had overhead power lines in the back of the property. And so this cylinder you see in the in this image, 3D image, is around the overhead single phase conductor that's on the end of this outrigger. We had to be 12 foot from that. And you can see I'm just clearing that with my roof line. So even though zoning may allow you to do something, there's a lot of other bodies that have a say about what, when, and how. Even though there was no public utility easement here, they review this plan. I didn't pick out the colors, nor the Home Depot fan. So at the time I did this, even though we had the MU zoning, the City of Austin has 2 departments for building permits, one for commercial and one for residential. And residential looks at duplexes and 2-family and single family, and commercial looks at multifamily. Well, because the building itself was a duplex, the commercial permitting didn't look at it. However, they looked at it for site planning. And so for site planning, we got a site plan exemption because we weren't exceeding a certain amount of square footage in terms of new impervious cover. This back area was paved and had a building on it. So we were under this limitation of what we call a site plan exemption. So I got the site plan exemption, and then I went to go get the building permit with commercial, and they said, we're not going to look at it. You got to go to residential. So I went to residential, and they said, we're not going to look at it. It's multifamily. And so they essentially gave me the building permit with no plan review because neither group would look at it. Unfortunately, this led to all kinds of issues in the field because every time an inspector came out there, they're like, wait a minute, you're doing a duplex. You already got a living unit. You can't do a duplex. This is triplex. You can't do it. So it would get red tagged. And neighbors would call it, cause a lot of delays. I had to go through the whole scenario about how I got this permit in the first place multiple times, had to go to the city. It resulted in a lot of extra effort on my part. And the client effectively felt that it was my fault. So even though I was able to do this, they said, well, you caused all these problems and delays. And even though they sold the project, in the end, they sold each one with a condo regime and made quite a bit of money. I had a $1,500 charge to them for these extra effort to deal with the city and to deal with the inspectors that they hadn't initially contracted me for, and they decided they weren't going to pay me for that. This is a little case study of a project where the client is a very, very meaningful and real situation where you have a young family, they have a child, they live in the house, and their mother has fallen ill with cancer. And in her limited time, they thought it would be a good idea to build a house in the back of the property and allow her to stay there so that they could provide her nursing care. And so they commissioned me to do this small house in the back of the property. Now there's a couple things. You'll see this CW, it's a cold water line going out to the Pequeño Street here. We also had to provide some parking for this living unit in the City of Austin. And we also, whenever there's a policy in the City of Austin, whenever you provide a second living unit, that you have to provide a sidewalk along one side of the property in the right of way. Here's a quick look at the plan. It's 500 square foot, a little petite house. She really wanted a king size bed and a fireplace. So here's some 3D looks at the building. Now, at the time that we did this, the utility required a new water meter if there was a second living unit, regardless of size. So because of that, we had to go through a utility tap permit process. At the time, there was no timelines for when the utility would have to review these plans. They didn't have a lot of mechanisms for reviewing them in residential, and they had just shifted from actually installing a lot of their own taps to hiring third party, making the developers or whoever was doing the work hire a third party to do the utility lines. So this ended up taking about 4 months to finally get the building permit. We had to pay a civil engineer to do the utility plan and pay for this new water meter and tap. Those were permit fees. And then we had installation costs from a third party to go out there and dig in the right of way. They have to be a bonded contractor at $15K. So just the utility costs alone for a 500 square foot piece were $42 a square foot. And the client, of course, was like, look, I look on Builder Trend and this is how much these houses should cost. Why is it costing this much? Well, unfortunately, in this case, the mother-in-law's cancer progressed too rapidly, and she ended up passing away before we actually were able to finish the project and did not build it. The property owner sold the lot to a developer and moved out of Austin, who immediately put a much larger ADU in the back. Now, in 2015, City of Austin tried to say that they could get approximately 50,000 new living units if they allowed an ADU to be on all of the houses. In the past, it was restricted to 7,000 square foot and smaller larger lots. The new zoning ordinance allowed the ADU to be on 5750 or larger lots. This is a lot of the lot size, the lots that are in the central city of Austin. 5750 is the vast majority. They put a limitation on the size of an ADU. Only 550 square feet could be on the second floor, so it doesn't loom over your neighbor. There's a lot of concerns in neighborhoods that these buildings in the back might loom over the neighbor. They said it could be located to the side and rear of the principal structure. And the parking requirements, initially when you could do an ADU, you had to provide a single parking spot for that ADU, like you saw on the small house that I had to do, which that would often include having to have an apron in the driveway and the roadway to get there, and you have to pave it and et cetera. But this, if you were within a quarter mile of the Imagine Austin Activity Corridor, which is primary corridors where they're trying to encourage pedestrian traffic, then you could get rid of that parking spot. Also, and not in small part because of my advocacy and 3 or 4 other architects, the Austin Water Utility, with our experience with that small house, changed their policy and allowed people to start to do ADUs when they saw the real economic impact on, small family living in a house, the economic impact of the utilities. They changed their policy, and now we are allowed to do an ADU in the background, the back of the house, and stay on the same meter as long as we don't exceed a total of 4.5 bathrooms on the side or less than 45 fixed units. This is a critical policy change simply by the water utility that's affected the ability to build ADUs. And after 2015, this is just some sample data. You can see that these ADUs are happening pretty much in the city core. We see an increase in 2017 of ADUs. I would say this has easily doubled since 2017 to 2021. But you also see right here, duplex, triplex development, tinier, much smaller than in the past. With the ADU ordinance, we had a spring up of a nonprofit organization. Just wanted to kind of talk about these fellows because they're great. They provide affordable housing. They provide a turnkey solution to get you at what they call the alley flat in a lot of the east side houses or neighbors where you have east side neighborhood of Austin where you have existing single family stock, smaller lots, but they have alley access. They have provided this service for folks that meet 80% of mean family income. They provide subsidies to not only design, permit, and but also construct small houses in the back of the properties. And here's a couple of examples of those.
Sweet.
You can see 849 square feet, 2 beds. There's also been some market rate groups. You saw in that video, the one that went to the big 330 square foot house. That's by Kangaroo. They're still here in Austin. And just wanted to point out one thing here. Here's their turnkey installation, 70 to 88,000. Of course, that does not include shipping and utility hookups. Not a small amount of money. One of the impacts of the ADU ordinance happened to a project that I was building. And at the time, the ADU ordinance required us to have a parking spot for the unit in the back. And we had a very narrow lot here. You can see it's 50, but it got smaller as we went to the back. And so there was no way to provide a driveway all the way back here to this ADU. And so we did not put a kitchen in it. Now, the City of Austin defines that living unit as having all needs for sanitation, sleeping, and the preparation of food. If you eliminate one of those, then it is considered an accessory structure. Once you provide all of those, i.e. a kitchen sink, then, and a bathroom and sleep quarters, then you are an accessory dwelling. So we permitted this as an accessory studio that did not have a kitchen. Efficiency with, it's a sufficiency room here with some built-in cabinetry, Murphy bed, tight little bathroom, and then downstairs is a covered patio. And then one of the concerns with these, we'll get into this a little bit with our net zero stuff, but one of the needs for these accessory dwelling units is how do we get hot water? And in this case, this whole build was a 5-star green build. I was the architect and the builder for the project. And we had enough space to design for a heat pump water heater, which is allowed for a house that has no gas. Now we elected to eliminate gas from this site and use all electric for this development. There's a nice, the nice picture of it. We didn't have a kitchen, but couldn't get that 9-foot access drive. And so after the ordinance passed, the owner came back in and put their kitchen sink in and put a little cooktop in there. I'm now going to start to get into some of the costs associated with these builds. So this project is 480 square feet, $160K to build it. That's approximately $334 per square foot. I've got 2 speculative projects we're going to take a quick look at. After the ordinance passed, and these are about simultaneously around 2015 and 2017. We have a single family house and we have an accessory dwelling unit in the back. This one is an 850 square foot unit. It's got 1 bedroom and a bath down in a very tight space with a living unit. The city of Austin has a restriction on gross floor area for residential construction within the urban core, and anything over a 15-foot high ceiling has to be calculated twice towards limitations that you're allowed on the site. So in this case, we have a 14-foot ceiling, which is just under, and we have another bedroom and bath up on the 2nd floor. So there's a picture of the unit. Some interior shots. That's that living unit with the living room with the 14-foot high ceiling. Fairly tight kitchen. On this 2-family spec, the property was bought for $365K, and the project was built for around $460, or about $160 per square foot. Now that was the cost to the developer with no builder percentage, not including insurance or other things like that. This was not a GC project. The developer was the GC. The 850 square foot unit was put on the market at $350K, and the 1944 square foot unit, the primary, was put at $605. And the small unit got 4 offers in 3 days, and it sold for over its asking price. And in fact, we had some young couples actually send pictures of their family to the builder and imploring them to please accept their offer, showing their dog. They're looking for a place for their dog and their child. A single mother, for example, sent a picture, please, effectively begging to let them accept their offer to live in the small unit. At the time, the market wasn't quite what it is now here in Austin. And it took 8 weeks for the larger house to sell, and they actually reduced the price finally to get it gone. That is no longer the case. Now, this year, the primary residence would sell potentially for almost double that, which in this particular neighborhood is just astounding. Another speculative project where we tried to figure out how to get 3 bedrooms in the ADU. 1,100 square foot was the maximum allowable. Here's our floor plan. We had a master down where the toilet and one of the sinks was kind of shared as a powder. So the guests could use this powder, but it was also your toilet room for the master. And then the stair goes up and we got 2 bedrooms and a bath upstairs, just about as efficient and tight as we could make it. And of course, the thing that suffers a bit is the living unit, 1,100 square feet. This does have a 1-car garage. There's an image of it. You enter through the garage, kind of a little courtyard between the garage and the house space proper. Now, the whole reason to try to get 3 bedrooms, we were thinking The developer was thinking this is for a family. A family's going to want this. And some of them, if someone has 2 kids, it'd be great to be able to have 3 bedrooms. 3 bedrooms and 1,100 square feet is difficult. Open stairway helps, and some windows out to a screen porch helps. Screen porch is exempt from that gross floor area calculation. It is underneath living space in the city. It has Austin has a very peculiarity about the size of porches being exempt from this. But if you have a living space on top of it, you only get 200 square feet of it exempt. So this is a 200 square foot screened porch. So some real costs, $395K, $600K to build over 9 months. The people who went in back unit just couldn't understand why the living space was so small. And ultimately, it wasn't a family that bought it anyway, even though they condo regimed it and they were prepared to sell both. A millionaire comes in from South America and just bought them both and Airbnb'd the ADU to help fund it. Now I have 2 more projects to look at. A little bit more detail on the construction costs. Shipping containers. Everybody's talking about shipping containers. My client wanted a shipping container. Shipping containers are very good for shipping items across the Atlantic and stacking on top of each other, all of those items. But as a living space, it's not all that great. In this case, I used it as a structural support and storage. Existing 1-bedroom, 3-bath house. And this is a 550 square foot ADU on top of a carport and the storage shipping container. There's the floor plan. Of course, shipping containers are very heavy and difficult to navigate on a trailer on an 8-foot wide driveway. I had to ask the neighbor if we could traverse their property. And of course, he had his sprinkler system all down the side of the driveway here on his beautiful, pristine lawn, which I attempted to protect to get the trailer back. So there it is moving back, some precarious moments. The property owner here was very concerned. He was standing in his window watching as we got real close to his AC unit. But for $2,700, there's a shipping container dropped. Good luck. Well, that thing weighs 3.5 tons empty. So now how do I get it on my slab? Luckily, my welder was also a licensed forklift driver. So we had to rent a VersaLift. And he was able to position the shipping container for me. The VersaLift rental was $1,000. Utilities, including a sump pump, were required. Where do all these utilities get up past the carport and into the unit itself? We have AC, a compressor, Freon coolant lines, the sewer, I got a gas water heater on the other side of this, water and sewer coming up through this small little section. And I thought it'd be great to use TJIs as an efficient use of lumber for the floor. And even though I told them they couldn't do this, the guys that were actually on the site didn't pay attention and went ahead and drilled through the shear section on those to put in the Freon coolant lines for the mini split system. And so I had to come back in and structurally shore this section up. Stuff happens during construction. So there's the finished structure. Exterior stair. IKEA kitchen. Solar ready roof. There's a breakdown of the real numbers and costs for this. There's our shipping container, $3,700. Framing materials and labor, just kind of lump sum number. In Austin in the last year, framing materials have doubled and in some cases tripled the actual cost of lumber. one of the key lessons learned here is that appraisers do not look at accessory buildings and accessory structures as the same value as the primary residence. So the client had actually financed $75K to build this structure in the back. They cashed the rest of it and needed to get a refi to take their existing loan on their house and get it all bundled together. And the first time the appraisal had to come back at 425 total. And the first appraiser came back at 400 and effectively called the ADU that we had built at 150, 60K, valued it at about 50K. Now, even though in the same neighborhood, people have been condo regiming these accessory dwelling units and selling them for 300K at 550 square feet, those were not considered comparables. So luckily, the client was able to get another appraiser to come in at the number he needed, but it still was only valued at about 100K. So that's a very important thing to be aware of. If you're planning on that value, you need to consider that a lot of appraisers look at this as a single family lot with an accessory building that is not appraised at the same value as the primary house. So this is the last project. This was a multi-year endeavor and is still being built. I was approached almost 10 years ago initially to start the work. This was a development of affordable housing put on by several nonprofit organizations in Austin. And this is a picture of the grand opening, of course. This is an area in the east side of town that had been used for years as a dumping ground. It was a brownfield that we did clean up and got some tax credit for the property owners, which was a nonprofit, Guadalupe Neighborhood Development Corporation. We were invited on initially to do a lot of site planning work, just looking at how could we optimize the use of this land. There was a lot of impacts on it, including a flood zone through it. All of the work that was done by the nonprofits, as well as several architecture and engineering firms, was done pro bono. And that's all for the initial site design work. We invited the neighbors in the area and had several neighborhood design meetings where they were able to give their input on what they would like to see built in this subdivision. And the final site plan included some single family pieces here. And then right here, I have 4 duplexes, which were part of my design. There was also a community center. Here's our floodways kind of splitting the site. And then we have a combination of single family and duplex with some townhome development here. So we have a real mix of uses, single family to the north, and just south of here is a satellite Austin Community College campus. Here's the duplex pieces that we'll look at a little bit more closely. Big team involved in this, including Austin Energy. Some of the goals included a total of 90 living units. 100% of these units are affordable. The duplexes that we'll see are for rental to people that have a mean family income threshold of 30 to 60%. We also have ownership units for folks that meet the threshold of 60 to 80. We had construction cost goals of $125 per square foot. And we had the lofty goal with partnering with Austin Energy and Green Communities Initiative, which provided a large grant to meet 54% better than code, and to offset with that with a solar PV system that would zero us out. So the goal was net zero average for the year. When we entered into contract for the design of the actual buildings, we had to provide energy gauge modeling for at all 3 phases of design, from schematic to design development and to final construction documents. And we also had to provide construction cost estimating. We had goals of meeting a 5-star rating with Austin Energy's Green Building Program, one of the first rating programs for green building in the country. We actually used, as part of our goals to reach this 54% better than code, we did ground source heat pumps. One of the requirements of the green communities was that we had multiple meet the requirements of the ANSI for and ASHRAE 6162 for air changes, which is 3.5 air changes per hour, which is very difficult in a hot and humid climate. And that required energy recovery ventilator to be installed, which obviously is an expensive item. We also tried to design the units to optimize their orientation for the solar system. The solar generation would be on the roof line, so that stipulated certain things like a 7 and 12 pitch roof. And as we got into the energy modeling, just trying to get those last few percentages to get us down to the 46%, included things like adding clotheslines. This top line is the baseline that was established as Austin city limit. So this was the baseline that we were trying to exceed by the 54%. And as you see, this gets smaller. We get into smaller units. This gets more and more difficult as the energy density per square foot, obviously, but over the course of the year. We looked at what's the best way to build these things given cost and energy efficiency, and had a wide set of cases where the city of Austin, or Austin Energy, had numbers for energy usage based on new construction and construction method. Now, down here at the best average kilowatts per year was wood frame with foam insulation. So for a variety of reasons, even though things like SIPs and ICF and so many other construction methods can meet energy goals better, the coupled desire of affordable housing with this meant that our cost of construction had to utilize more readily available trades, readily available materials. And so a lot of mechanisms pushed to wood frame with foam insulation. Some different options, a single family shotgun house and a duplex here that's side by side with courtyards. I was tasked with creating a stacked duplex where the lower unit was a 1-bedroom, fully accessible unit. And the second floor was a two-bedroom unit. So it's a top-heavy duplex. And of course, we had to have quite a bit of an array. And even in the course of design, the efficiency of the solar panels increased. And so we were able to reduce the number of panels that you see here in these initial sketches. Lower floor plan, again, a fully accessible unit. Bedroom and bathroom, accessible kitchen, and then another entry point for the second floor unit. You'll notice these porches here, they're shown as integrated with the slab, and we have a structural column here and here supporting our second floor. As you can see here, you get it to the top of the stairs, you have living, kitchen, dining, and 2 bedrooms and 2 separate baths. So these were just some of the energy model outputs. The two that we're looking at in these duplexes that I'm showing you now are these. We had a conditioned unit area of 656 and 996 for the second floor. And this just shows how we attacked certain numbers, like the adding addition of ceiling fans, dryers, the clothes dryer being a big ticket item in terms of energy use. But this number here, miscellaneous, what is that? It's a huge purple number. Well, the miscellaneous is all the things we weren't sure about: televisions, computers, occupant use. As we get to a much more efficient envelope, you'll note that things like heating and cooling equal or are surpassed by water heating. And then this circular diagram, all you're seeing is this is solar, thermal, water heating, and PV system offsetting the total load. So we're at net zero. A couple of things that came up. One way for us to garner a few extra percentage points in our energy model was to show slab insulation. We had slabs on grade, and I came up with this detail that we would cantilever a 2x6 wall. So we have exterior walls that are 2x6. We used efficient framing systems so that we could line up our studs with our floor structure. So to minimize our thermal transference through the stud. It has exterior Dow Sys system, which is a structurally insulated panel, which gives us about an R4 on the exterior plus spray foam on the interior. So we break that thermal transmission through the studs. But I just wanted to note that even though this is a great idea, we're going to cantilever the 2x6 sill over so I can cover up my insulation on the slab wall. When you actually frame something, we now have a huge air gap. So the realities of these types of things, when you think it's a good idea and when it's not, is they're very, very real. So we had to do special sealing of these types of situations. And even though we insulated the slab around where the living space is, we have a contiguous slab that comes out to the porch, which you can see here. This is not flat work because it's supporting the structure above. And that is all integrated. We didn't have a thermal break. It was just too expensive to look at that. So we just said, oh, we'll see how this works. We don't have a lot of slab exposure. Maybe that won't be that big of a deal. And the finished product. The actual tenants that are here include a homeless veteran, Vietnam veteran, who still lives in his unit, and a single family mom who bought one of the, rents one of the lower units and is now going to ACC campus. So here are just the cost numbers on this. We did meet with our construction base cost, our $125 per square foot threshold. However, we had some minor change orders. We had to do some changes to the ADA showers because of uniform plumbing code and other things in the city of Austin. We couldn't do a roll-in shower without a floor drain. The floor drain added some costs. We also add in some other costs here associated with the actual site development that may not have, that are now going to be kind of layered over the whole subdivision. But because this was the first phase of the subdivision, things like the driveways and the roadways and the curb and gutter, we applied towards this portion of development. And then some of the professional fees, developer fees, architecture, everything else, soft costs, we came in at about $140 per square foot. So we didn't meet the 125, but we are adding probably about 15 or so square foot cost dollars per square foot for site development stuff, a little bit beyond just these duplexes. The stacked unit was critical for our cost because we have a smaller slab, and slabs and roofs are very, very expensive items of the construction. So when we stack this, we have those two items get minimized. The requirement of 3.5 air changes per hour really hurt us. We had to have 2 ERVs, so we're about $1,200 per unit. And of course, that's $2-3 a piece per square foot when you layer that on a small unit. It's a big deal. Not to mention the fact that the ERV that we installed, even though they're about 90, I think they're about a 90% efficiency, when we have really hot and humid days, it's a huge impact. It still can't quite get that latent heat out. And then of course, insulating the exterior slab should be carefully evaluated. This really causes problems when we're cooling. I mean, when we're heating, because we lose that heat right through the slab as a conductor. And then personal behavior has another huge impact. These were 5-star rated project. Here we are getting our certificate from Austin Energy. And then this last bit of the study for you today is going to be looking at the occupancy and kind of some review of what happened with these units. We had mostly older disabled residents in the lower sections because of the accessibility. We've had almost a continuous occupancy since 2013. Our upstairs units have been occupied mostly the whole time. Over the course of 42 months, our modeled averages here for energy use were very close to our annual averages, very close. Some far exceeded, some under. We had one unit that just consistently did poorly. I mean, very poorly. And it's essentially, there's actually something going on with the solar PV array where it's consistently produced less. And even though we've had the solar company out, we can't seem to find it. We also have an occupant there that is a little bit loose with their use of their clothes dryer. So certain things that we observe people doing, they put their air handler to the on position, means the fan's running the whole time. So now you have a kind of base load that you wouldn't have if the unit was cycling on and off per needs. People leave a room with the ceiling fan on. The higher anticipated clothes dryer use. And this one was really because people would have their friends come by and wash their clothes. And, obviously a clothes dryer is one of the key drivers of the energy use on the house. Hot water use was another one. And that when we have the solar system, we had solar thermal systems on these, but when people would take a shower later at night, it would have a little bit more impact on the electricity of the system. Some unanticipated things, when we have the solar array on the roof and a metal roof and all of that, we have stacked duplex, you got poor cell phone reception. So people are going outside to talk on their phones and leaving the doors open. And we also didn't have any kind of feedback for the property owners other than every month. So if we'd had some displays like SunPower does and others do, if we were able to pay for those displays inside the house where they're getting a sense of knowing where their electricity is being used, it probably would have helped a lot. So this is an actual load from Austin Energy over the course of a day, showing the PV coming in and the kind of general use. These bumps are the cycles of the AC unit, the ground source heat pump. And then some observations of some strange things, these weird spikes that happen. And those we determined were directly related to water heater coming on. And then, of course, this use of a clothes dryer that went on all day long. And then this is a FLIR camera look at that front porch, which we saw earlier, where you can see the heat loss coming out during the winter. And it's just like it shines up brighter than a bright light. And so having a thermal break when you have these continuous slabs would mitigate that issue, especially during our great snowpocalypse. So the last conclusions here, when you get the overall energy to very low levels, occupant actions have a huge impact. These little details about slab separation have a cumulative effect. So our small house movement is very strong, good reasons. Custom permanent ADUs are very expensive per square foot, costs very high. But that lower price point allows more people to get in to become homeowners, especially when you do a condo regime on a single family lot. Adding more living units to single family development is very effective for cities to add, to get more people and add density to the urban core, but it is very costly. And cost of construction is directly related to these green features. And as we've looked at our new IECC, for example, these keep escalating. Our envelope requirements are in terms of the U factors are escalating, our fenestration U factors, et cetera. And so each one of those jumps also increases our cost. So that concludes my presentation. A little bit over our 45, but I hope if you have any questions, be happy to answer them, and hope we didn't lose too many folks.
Travis, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. I was noticing the participants, and you maintained your participation very, very high. So
tried to go fast. Had a lot of stuff there. Went fast. Skipped.
You did. But I asked people to put their questions on the chat so that we would allow you to make your presentation, and then we would have questions. So I've been monitoring those, and so I will start with the first one from Mellon West, who commented that ADUs are a topic in Dallas, and there's some concern of detractors regarding short-term rentals are a nuisance, they're unregulated. And the question was, how does Austin address these issues?
Great, great question. For the short-term rentals, okay, the fact remains that people have a piece of property, it's their property. And one way for them to finance their construction or remodels on their houses or to build these ADUs is to short-term rental it. And we have events in Austin, for example. It's a huge market, and it has affected hotel occupancy, but not much. Pandemic's probably had a much bigger effect on that. But City of Austin enacted a short-term ordinance as well, short-term rental ordinance. And so the only way you can rent out an accessory dwelling unit is if you are the property owner, if the property owner lives in the primary. So same complaint from neighbors. You know, you've got developers coming in and buying single family home stock, putting in an ADU, and now they've got 2 rentals, and then they're never there. You have people having parties there. You have there's legitimate concerns. You have a neighborhood that's established, and now you've got people that are just coming in, you know, on a kind of very transient basis. And so they've addressed that through ordinance. Now, the enforcement of that has been pretty strong as of late. And there's another division in the City of Austin that reviews things like Airbnb and VRBO. And if people are doing things illegally for the ordinance, they are getting cited. So even though the market is strong to push people to have these types of things, the city has tried, and Austin has tried to mitigate some of the negatives of them. The vast majority of ADUs are built, and I would say from a speculative developer standpoint, they are condo regiming the lot, which has nothing to do with the city. That's a state regulated process. And then they are creating a small little neighborhood association or, you know, homeowners association between 2 homeowners, and they sell each building. So I hope that answered a little bit. I don't know as much about the hotel impacts, but about the short-term rental has been a big issue here, and it's been resolved as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Travis. Some other engineers on this meeting are asking whether you they saw your drawings, and they're asking for recommendations on 3D CAD software. Sure.
I recommend ArchiCAD. This is created or owned by Vectorworks. Nemechek, I'm sorry. And Nemechek owns Vectorworks and ArchiCAD. I was an early adopter of ArchiCAD, which was the first building information modeler. It was widely adopted in Europe and started to be adopted here in the United States. That early adoption has some issues, but I love designing and building information modeling software. And just so you don't, for those that don't know, I designed the building in 3D. And from that 3-dimensional digital model, all of my construction documents are extracted. So I don't have a system where I design something in 3D like SketchUp or some other 3D modeler and then come over and then use 2-dimensional drawing, CAD drawing. The integration of the 2-dimensional construction documents with the 3D model, not only does that help your client visualize what they're actually going to build, it minimizes conflicts, for example, with mechanical systems, electrical and plumbing systems in relationship to structural, in relationship to roof lines. And it allows a client to look at that design and go, hey, I don't like it. I don't know why, but at least I don't like that. And so they become a critical part of that design process for me. And that's when I've had more success, in my view, if everyone feels like they're engaged in that design process. It's not that I do a really beautiful watercolor sketch over here and go there, it looks something like this, and then we get reality. The real quality of that. And one last thing about building information modeling, I'm sorry, I'm on the soapbox about this. Revit is the market share in Austin, not Austin, market share of the United States is AutoCAD's ownership of Revit. That's their building information modeling software. I don't use it, but it's very similar. The other aspect of this is that you are now having integrated either third party or with the software energy modeling information that can be extracted based on your position of that model globally, latitudinally, to know exactly what kind of load. You can input your SHGC and U factors on your fenestration. You can look at the overhang effect, and you can model that directly in the digital model, and it's much closer, much more closely to what you're actually going to get. So, ArchiCAD. There you go.
There you go. You talked about this a little bit with the cost of lumber and framing materials doubling, if not tripling, fairly recently. Are there any other building materials that you have seen change or the main changes in building materials since you started your career?
I think the biggest thing that we're seeing use of, I mean, 20 years ago, we were talking about straw bale and ICFs. We were doing things, SIPs. So, I mean, it's been a long time. I don't know that there's been a huge amount of changes there, but what I've seen a little bit that I'll note is structurally insulated panels like the zip wall. Like the R panel for zip wall allows you to have an integrated, it's about an R2, I think, but it's a little bit of integrated insulation, which allows you to put that on the exterior, but then have a finished exterior vapor barrier and water shedding plane that's integrated with that sheathing. So that's a fairly, I mean, within the last 10 years, it's been around a while, but it's being used more because if you've looked at the new IECC in 2021, everything in terms of your insulation values on your thermal envelope are increasing, and they're really pushing more towards continuous insulation on the exterior of the building. So there's one.
I know that you mentioned some shipping containers that you used in one instance. I take it you're not a fan of those. But would you comment a little bit more on the use of shipping containers in affordable housing construction?
I will just say that they are very good for stacking on top of each other. A structural component in the corner. They can support a huge amount of load. They're very good for shipping materials on a boat across the Atlantic. The space inside them is very tight. And if you've ever had any kind of metal box out in the middle of Texas sun, it's not something I want to be in. However, with quite a bit of effort, you can modify the metal box to have daylighting, ventilation, insulation, electrical, plumbing. And there may be some value in that structure. I have a schematic design, although we ended up not building it. I've got a couple others that might happen, where we use the shipping containers as structure to support trusses for a roof, which creates spaces that are not shipping containers, in between them. That seemed to work economically, it was not too bad. So I think there's a lot of people doing interesting things with containers, but there's a lot of labor to get them to be a habitable space.
And I noticed there's another comment about quite a bit of use of stairs. And Melon was wondering if you've employed elevators in any of your designs instead of stairs.
I have. And it was one that we did that was a 3-story house it was a custom house. It was not an elevator. It was one of these, I can't remember the name of it, I'm sorry, but it was like a hamster habit trail. It was like a pneumatic, it was pneumatic. And you had a compartment in this PVC circle that was just big enough. It was about 3'4" in diameter, just big enough for this platform. And it used the air pressure to raise you 1 floor, even though it was a 3-story house. It allowed them to get it 1 floor. I have not put in any elevators or chair lifts. I did put a chair lift in an ADU very recently. So we had a single run stair that we designed wide enough to allow a chairlift, you know, the one that kind of attaches to the side there and kind of winches its way up. So not recently any other requests.
And I think, I'm not sure who Oak Cliff Gardens is, but in where exactly the presentation was, but they asked what kind of hot water did you use for the homes?
It's another great question. A lot of the ones I do have tankless, have gas fired tankless water heaters. Energy efficiency, relative availability of gas in the inner city of Austin. Most of it is readily available. Most of the existing housing stock has gas. The vast majority of failures during 2021 freeze were gas tankless water heaters on the exterior of the building. The valves being where the weak spot is, you can't quite insulate it. You know, you may have the lines coming out insulated, or you may have it in a box, but the valves themselves are just kind of awkward, and most people don't insulate them. And so there's where we had some fairly significant failures. If I've heard of anyone having failures with their house, it was the exterior tankless gas water heater. It's an issue with the smaller units because the city of Austin has fairly strong amendments about resistance heating, and these small ADUs lend themselves to like a small electric tankless. You know, you don't have to run a gas line back there. Save that money. There are some fairly efficient ones out there. Bosch and Stiebel, I think, has another one that's fairly good. 3,500 watt units, on demand, tankless electric water heaters. But those aren't allowed in the city of Austin without a timer. And so this pushes a lot of people away from it. And you have to have significant space if you use a heat pump water heater. You just need more space. It needs to be well ventilated. It's heat pump water heaters are kind of noisy. So I like the heat pump water heater, by far the most efficient system. But on these small houses, you know, a lot of them are 50 gallon, 80 gallons. It's a big space on a small house to allow for this heat pump water heaters. So for the most part, gas tankless. Although all the people that's had failures that have come talk to me about them have said, can we put the tankless water heater in the attic? And I'm like, hey, 20 years ago, nobody wanted a water heater in their attic. Trust me. If it leaked up there, oh boy, what a problem. But now they're like, can we put it in the attic? You know, so I try to say no, but there's some strong, you know, snowpocalypse had an impact, right?
Yes, it did. Melon, you had a question, a
I just
follow-up?
want to back up to the, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Back to the elevator. I've seen we saw a pneumatic elevator in a presentation, I don't know, 6 months ago, but which is intriguing. But I was thinking more rather than a conventional elevator that we put in actually in homes that we have built with Coleman Homes for disabled people, more like an open hydraulic lift with a gate, you know, on either end, you know, a la Star Trek. And that sort of, you know, they're slow, but you can move furniture up and down them, and you can move people up and down them. I just don't know how expensive they are, but staircases take a lot of space. And that turnaround at the end with a mattress is, you know, a big one. All right. Anyway, that's all I got to say.
Yeah.
Travis, there was also a question on whether you've considered using PM beam foundations instead of slabs.
Yes. When we looked at the cost associated with that for the affordable housing project, it was determined that the engineering associated with the pier and beam would have to be, we're talking about the affordable housing project specifically, but Austin has various areas where we have highly expansive clay, and those areas vary. I mean, we can have rock and we can have highly expansive clay. We have 20 feet of it. In this particular case, we had highly expansive soils for the affordable housing project. And so there was a concern from engineering that we would have to do significant pier depth to support the structures, and that just the numbers in that case didn't make as much sense. So in addition to that particular issue, why would we choose pier and beam over slab? The pier and beam has a couple of issues with it. One is that we have to deal with the ventilation of that crawl space. We have to deal with the vapor conditions in the crawl space. We have to deal with the insulation of that. We have to deal with keeping animals out of it over time. And a lot of that, even though a lot of existing housing stock in Austin has pier and beam or perimeter beam with pier, those things outweigh from a kind of usability. Even though you get it better, you can put that nice R30, you put insulation closed cell underneath there. You could do a lot of things to make that a really well insulated portion of the envelope. Though some of those other issues and potentially the cost of deep piers offset the idea we could float the raft of the concrete. We can float that thing on that terrible clay, you know, kind of take out 2 or 3 feet of bad clay and float it on a nice percolating bed of gravel, and that economically makes more sense. So, and we don't have these other issues. We don't have to deal with insulate. What's the finished floor? And for affordable housing, the finished floor was concrete. So that became the finished floor as well, where we would have to come in with something, linoleum tile with the affordable housing or carpet or something like that. So there are some of the considerations.
I know you've already mentioned the failure of the gas valves in the houses. What other challenges did the homes you build in particular this last project that you showed us, how did they fare in the snowmageddon and the deep freeze we had in February?
That's a good question too. In fact, I asked Mark Rogers, who's the head of Guadalupe Neighborhood Development Corporation. So they own those duplexes. They rent them out. They also do the ownership single family there. And they have a multifamily building that's run by the Jeremiah Project, which is primarily helping single mothers, and providing social services for them. So all in that same site are all of these types of buildings. And the duplexes, you know, I think, I don't remember the percentage gain that we had by using a ground source heat pump, but I want to say it was fairly significant in terms of those goals that we had. So it was maybe 5% increase in efficiency, maybe between 3 and 5, I want to say. So we decided to do it, and we had to drill those wells, and you drill 1,200 foot well per ton of AC effectively. And so we had three wells for each duplex, three deep wells, 2 of them for the 2-story and 1 for the single. Well, I mean, this is a particular technology. It's great. It uses water in a loop, goes down, gets cooled up, comes in, cools the coil, and then you blow that back in, you cool your water, your coolant, and you put it back into the coil inside the house. It's a great technology. We had water at that site, ground source water, so that helps take that heat and kind of dissipate it away as it kind of flows across these cores. But we had one of those pumps fail. They weren't sure that it was because of the snowpocalypse or what, but the exterior compressor pump failed, and it cost $7,800 to repair.
Wow.
So they're trying to get insurance and do some other things with it right now. And that was mainly because they lost power over the course of 3 days. I think it was 3 days that they were without power. And the units inside, everybody got to stay in. The efficiency of the envelope, they were plenty warm inside the house. They didn't get too cold. They didn't have to get relocated, so that was all good. But they did have some failures of tankless water heaters on the single family portions, and they had one failure of a heat pump. They don't know if it, I mean, it could have been just, it was a time to go. But you know, these are not, even though the technology is great, they're not inexpensive change outs when something like that goes bad.
We had a question from Lisa regarding what kind of feedback mechanisms you have used or considered to improve the personal behavior for the energy efficiency in the homes?
Well, for the affordable housing project, they have a big list of items and introduction. Whenever someone comes in to rent one of those spaces, they get the download on how the house operates and what they're supposed to do. And then they get feedback on a monthly basis. And almost all of the more current solar systems I've installed, we have, I can't remember the name of the products, but there's various different types of systems that are giving you instant feedback on your loads relative to the amount of power you're producing. And then some of these systems extrapolate out into controlling your, giving you into some smart automation. I've got a project on the boards right now that's going to be super smart automated, but he's got a third-party contractor coming in to do all of the IT work. So I'm looking forward to becoming more educated. He also wants it to be a net zero project. So we're looking at maybe a 12 kilowatt array on the project. So I think I'll have more information at some later date, but right now, the biggest thing that we've been using is just giving the feedback through that panel system that comes with your solar generator, and having some way to get the data out. Because if you get the data out, most of the clients that are looking at that know they know when their kids are doing something they're not supposed to be doing. They can actually get it, why you run the water, and whatnot. So I don't have names of products, but I know that we're moving that way more and more. I will mention one other thing about these products. A lot of these run on low voltage systems. They run on your Cat 7 or whatnot that you're putting in if you're wiring it. Some of them are wireless. So you've got a real need for good networking inside your home. And whenever you have anything that's wired or low voltage, you need to put a surge protector on your whole house, and you need to put a surge protector on every item, because the grid is not stable. And for example, that big house that I did, that was 5-star that I was the builder on, 1 month after they moved in, when we had carrier green speed heat pumps for the AC, we had all these mini blinds, that were low voltage operated mini blinds for their high windows, and they got hit by lightning and fried most of it. And came back, and I mean every single master chip panel in each air handler fried. And so we went back and did a whole house surge protector on the air handler, surge protector in the compressor, surge protector on our low voltage panel. So just be aware, a lot of this tech stuff is great, but it has some risks.
Melon, before I go to you, Lisa, did that answer your question?
Sure, I think he ended up covering it a couple of slides later anyway, but yeah, that's really interesting about the low voltage stuff and needing surge protection. That's good to know. Thank you.
Melon?
Well, I was going to defer to Lisa first, but thank you for doing that. My question is there any sort of mechanism to reward people who participate in these programs for lowering their energy use? So like, if you use more than anybody in the neighborhood, you get a Amazon gift card, whatever.
Right.
But a reward mechanism rather than just who's going to look at a little panel on their wall, every day. I don't. Anyway,
yeah.
Just a thought.
No, in fact, that the same discussion we had with Guadalupe Neighborhood Development Corporation on some of their new projects that they're doing is exactly that. When they have the duplexes initially, when they rented them out, it's all bills paid. So there's just no connectivity between the occupant and what they're doing. And so they've started to institute some changes that do exactly that when your solar system outperforms your actual usage, that you get a benefit, and essentially that's a check. So when you have these people that are low income folks getting that benefit, they're much more motivated. So very good point.
Travis, there's another question about whether Austin has considered having standard building plans for ADUs the way Oakland, California has?
Yeah, absolutely. City of Austin is in that discussion right now. So I haven't been invited.
Any feel on how it's going?
I don't know. I know that the AIA wanted to have some impact on it, and I was the residential advocacy chair, and they just brought it up at the last part of my tenure as chair. And so I'm not sure how things are going with that, but I know that it's ongoing, that there's some idea that not only would these pre-designed plans be more affordable, that they would also have expedited permitting fees and response times. I mean, right now in the city of Austin, it takes 2 months to get a residential permit from the time you turn the plans in to the time you get a permit. So they're very backlogged, they're very busy. So if they had a set of plans that, at least this is what they were talking about doing, whether they actually do it, I don't know, but there's a set of plans, it's already been permitted. Here's the stock drawings, you adapt it to your site, and we're gonna permit you much faster, lower fees, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know where it stands now, but I know that they just started at the end of last year, that discussion.
And then there's a question about related to that, whether you looked at any modular offsite build and then having the ADU dropped in.
I haven't personally done any offsites, but people like Kangaroo, which I mentioned in the presentation, are doing exactly that. So there are several startup companies here in Austin that are doing exactly that. I was talking now, and there's also these ones that are really trying to fit the niche of the home office. You know, they don't provide plumbing. It's under 200 square feet. It's a shed, and they provide electric to it. And they're putting those on the back of people's property for, you know, $20K, and do it as fast as they can so people can go out there and run their, and, you know, have a little wall unit in there and have their home office. So there are a lot of people, and those are boxes that are pre-manufactured. They bring them in and they pull them back there with a bobcat and put them on piers, and away you go.
How does, in this specific to Austin, do you know how Austin treats ADU rentals to relatives, parents, children? So that's part of what you were doing, I think.
You know, as long as direct family members, there's no issue. So when you're renting it to the riffraff, you get in trouble. So yeah, there's no particular requirements about renting to family members. You can rent a room in your house to a family member. You can rent an ADU. No issue there.
There's another question about whether you looked at thermal concrete floors, for example, PEX tube heating.
I've only, when I did my own ADU, I wanted to do it. I wanted to run it. It wasn't concrete. It was going to be in my, because this is a second floor unit here. But there was I had so many concerns about condensation and humidity controls, and having some kind of issue with the flooring. I just decided not to do it. With that said, I'm part of the Passive House group here in Austin, and there's several projects that are now looking at radiant floor systems for their heating. So I know there's going to be a lot more case studies to see how it goes here in our climate for those conditions, and hopefully in the next couple of years we'll have some data on that and have some systems that make sense.
Okay. And then there's a general question of what you think of Sarah Susanka's work. I know you mentioned her books at the beginning.
Well, I mean, I think it struck a chord with people. A lot of the projects that she does, the thing that's probably lacking, if I was to say anything, because I think she's great, and I really like a lot of the points she makes. I like the work. I think if there's a thing that's lacking, it's the connectivity to cost, because many of the projects are highly crafted, beautiful woodworking, and they have this kind of warmth to them that many people desire. You know, you look at images and they have desire, people want that, and they come to me and they say, I want this. And then I go, okay, and we get into the realities of it. And unfortunately, a lot of the built-ins and beautiful built-in nooks and cabinetry work has to go, gets compromised out. It doesn't mean we don't get some of the flavor or the joy of that or the quality of daylighting or so many of these other things that she seems to do quite well. So I got mostly positive to say about her and her work.
Have you considered using DC appliances?
Yeah, I have a 5-star green build right now where there's a startup in Austin and they're running all of their electrical with DC. I think they've got a couple of appliances. I see the comment here. It'll be really interesting to see. We might put that on the Cool House tour next year, not this coming year, but next year if he gets it done. He's doing the install himself, and it's taking months to figure out how he wants to do, all the DC, what's on DC and what's not. And I have one other client that's got some sensitivities about AC electromagnetic field issues and really didn't want to have anything there. And so I actually introduced her to the startup company. So we might have some more installs that are DC. I know this one will be interesting to see how it actually works out, and I'll get some real numbers on the cost, and the quality of light is a little weird. I think the LEDs that he brought in there, they're almost excessively bright, and working at their temperature. It's more about the availability with the systems. He's come in with these, the lighting is just, it's not, although with tape lighted, really expensive LED tape lighting, you can get the nice warm colors and get that, maybe 2,700 to 3,000 Kelvin kind of warm color. But a lot of the stuff that he's bringing in almost has an industrial flavor. So I'm a little worried. When he turns it all on, it's going to be like, in the hospital. But, we'll see how it goes. It's all very controllable, very dimmable. And so all of that should allow some control about that kind of the quality of it, I'm hoping.
That'd be really neat to see on the Cool House tour.
Yeah, hopefully he'll get it done. He's been working on the house for 1.5 years.
Yeah.
So hopefully.
Okay, I'm sure I must have missed some of your questions. So I'm going to open it up to participants. If anybody has a specific question, please unmute yourself and ask your question. If you're, be cognizant of other people who may also want to ask questions, and play nice. Anybody?
I have a question. On your EMP problem with the low voltage stuff, do you know if that wiring for the low voltage control between the electronics and the servos and sensors was covered with a shield and a Mylar or braid shield for EMP?
I do not know.
Okay.
I know that
can help.
the concern. I know. Go ahead.
That's usually where it comes in, is because that stuff is a massive antenna, and the lightning strike puts out a huge time varying magnetic field that puts voltage on everything, and it doesn't even have to get into the power distribution. It'll bring it in that way too, because you have large copper conductors. But the thing is that those little instrumentation wires work the same way, so they get the same flux crossing conductor and the same voltage spike right there on the wire to the sensors, all that stuff that comes back to the electric control module. So that, I worked in military electronics, and that's a huge deal, is to suppress that. It needs to be shielded and grounded at the center point, not end to end. And if you do that, usually stuff will survive better. So I would say before you throw out or avoid that, look at the installation notes or whatever, and see if they're recommending that, because they should be doing that. And a lot of these places, it's not UL and they're not PEs, and it's not necessarily, well, it may be okay design, but it's not, the application notes are not really where they could be. So I'd recommend that.
Now, thank you. I'll definitely look at that. The biggest concern that the client that I had raised was about a lot of the controllers and all the rheostat pieces. So we talked about a manifolded system, very centrally located, all shielded, and then each line circuiting out. So the actual wiring I'll raise with the startup guy and just see what he's doing, because it might be interesting to see, because I know that they are on top of it. And all of those issues are a concern. So thank you for bringing it up. I mean, obviously you got a copper wire running through your wall. It's going to be, we're creating a field here. So
Yeah, they should know
Yeah,
what they're
but,
doing, but the other thing is the chips in those controllers are not anywhere near, they're low voltage, they're not UL, they're not mill or anything. You can make a controller that'll work, but it's low cost commercial stuff. So it's going to be a problem for a lot of manufacturers.
Thank you, Joel. Anybody else has a question for Travis? Okay, Travis, I want to thank you on behalf of NTREG and the entire membership. It was a wonderful presentation. You kept us all interested and captivated. And please, let's give a great round of applause to Travis for his presentation.
thank you.
Our next meeting is on May 8th. We don't have a speaker and a topic yet. We're trying to finalize that, and we will be posting that on the NTREG website and sending out the MailChimp and the Groups.io and the Eventbrite and the Facebook notices as soon as we have it. Again, thank you all for participating. We can't do this without you. And we can't do this without the great speakers like Mr. Young. Thank you again. We appreciate it. And this will be up on the website in the next few days. Thank you very much. Thanks.